It was a short film called La Corona, and it was about a beauty competition in a prison in Colombia. We got an Oscar nomination for that film. I feel like sometimes I don't have a sense of home because I grew up in Peru, but I left so young that I don't feel like that's home anymore, but I also don't feel like I have a home in the United States. The crew is Latino, is Latinx. So there's a lot of pride there. But to really see the faces of the people that would have been affected by it through a film was incredibly powerful to me. And I was just like, I want to be involved with that.
Welcome back to Doce, the podcast for immigrants by immigrants. I'm your host, Valen, and my guest today is Carla Gutiérrez. She's an Emmy-winning director and editor, and the creative force behind some of the most powerful documentary storytelling of the decade. Her directorial debut, Frida, premiered at Sundance and reintroduces Frida Kahlo, the world-renowned painter, in a way that feels intimate and raw, and completely her own. A film built from Frida's own words and diaries. And since this episode first aired, that work has gone on to earn Carla her first Emmy. Before stepping into the director's chair, Carla shaped stories that define culture. From RGB about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court Justice, to La Corona and Julia, her work has been recognized across the Oscars, Critics' Choice, and Tribeca Film Festival. But beyond accolades, Carla is also a Peruvian immigrant. She's a mother and a storyteller. In this episode, we talk about what it means to tell stories that challenge how we see icons, how her own experience as an immigrant informs her storytelling, and the responsibility that comes with shaping someone else's legacy. This episode contains a few spoilers for Frida, so if you haven't watched it, you might want to come back later. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. You agreed to the interview. I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna watch the film again. And I was watching with my sister, my brother-in-law, and I just got so caught up like in the story again. And I was like, I was gonna take notes, So
that's great. I mean, that tells me that we, that we did our job, that we are able to like just connect to your heart without, and not let you go. So, and we worked really hard to do that.
No.
That makes me feel great.
I literally showed that movie to everyone. I've talked to everyone about it.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to ask you what it means to you to make a film about like one of Mexico's most iconic figures, world-renowned figures, Frida. What does it mean to you? Like do you connect? Do you feel identify with Frida? How do you feel about her and this movie?
I came from Peru when I was 14 years old. So I am a immigrant, hence, my accent is still really strong. But I actually connected with her at the beginning when I was 19 years old as an immigrant. The first painting that I connected with was a painting of her experience in the United States. And she actually lived in the United States for quite a bit. She was here for like about 3 years. And, there was a couple of times where like she went back to Mexico and then came back to the United States. But her husband was working here a lot, like really early on in their marriage. So there's this painting, the borderline painting, where she's standing on a pedestal with a very pretty pink dress. You see her entire body because she did so many self-portraits. And she's standing in between the United States and Mexico. That was the first painting that I saw of her. And I just kind of saw myself and my emotions as a recent immigrant really reflected in that painting. So that's what kind of pulled me into learning more about her. And I did get obsessed with her. I mean, I found a lot of her other paintings also the same. I had the same experiences. You're looking at her face, but I really saw a lot of emotions that I was going through as a young woman reflected on those paintings. And obviously, I am familiar with the universe, like the culture that created her, but she was born so many years ago. There's so many differences between Peru and Mexico. One of the things that is really important for me in my process, both as an editor, as a director, and hopefully, if I get to direct other films after this, is that you can have a personal connection with the subject matter, but you have to really do your homework really well and go a lot deeper. We actually did a lot of research on this film. I wanted to really understand not only about Frida's life and how other academics had seen her life, how other academics thought about her paintings and what they meant, but also really understand Mexico of the time, really understand, the context of the world that really inspired her and created her, or that she pushed against, right? So we wanted the film to really capture that without being didactic, without being kind of like a history lesson,
Yeah.
but that people could feel that, like in every single shot that we chose of Mexico, in every single shot that we chose of the United States, New York, Paris. For us, it's we wanted to create an emotional ride, a very personal, intimate story. But that intimate story is, the foundation for that is a lot of research that me and my team did on the film. A lot of conversations about what this painting means, what that other painting meant to her. But, you always bring in a little bit of yourself in this process. So there's definitely I was really interested, for example, in being a young Latina growing up in a very Catholic world, right? What is asked of us? We're asked
Yeah.
not to ask questions. We're told not to ask questions. So that was really interesting to me that Frida was pushing against. She was very curious, very rebellious, irreverent, and she kept asking questions when she was little, right? She's like, is Virgin Mary really a virgin? So there, that's a little bit of a reflection of my interests and my understanding of that culture as well.
When you mentioned, the young Latina, I think that's part of why, I connect with it so much. The rebellious nature, but it wasn't even to be chaotic. She was just being herself. I think that
Yes.
what stood out to me the most was when she was in New York. A little bit of a spoiler if somebody hasn't watched it. When she was in New York and she was wearing the what she was wearing at the time, being very Mexican and wearing the
The Tejana
attire.
dresses, yeah.
Yeah, and she was just saying how people seem so pretentious, and she was like, I just want to go back to my hometown. And I was like, that's so interesting, It's she was like, yeah, people are here just about the looks, and it's funny because you think of New York and LA, and today I think that's a conception people have about those places. And she was there in the 1920s. So it's funny that over time some things don't change. So I was like,
Yeah.
wow, okay, I can relate, Frida. I want to go back home too.
And it's interesting because she was a difficult, complicated woman. And to me, one of the beautiful things about working in this film is also really hearing her fragility as a woman, how she was,
Yes.
had so many questions about, the daily challenges that we all women have, right? Being in very traditional heterosexual relationships. A lot of people think of her relationship with Diego Rivera as being very open and equal, but
Mm.
there was power dynamics there that to me read as very traditional. When I was a young Latina here in the United States, I remember there was definitely an image that was imposed on me really, really quickly in my high school when I was just new and I didn't understand any English, which was this kind of exotic, sexy, being.
Mm.
And I was very surprised by it because I was so young at that time. I remember this guy came behind me. It was my first week here in the United States, and he whispered in my ear, "Rico Suave." Do you remember that song? It was from a long time ago. It was this Puerto Rican guy that had a prelude to reggaeton. It was kind of like reggae, Latino reggae at the time with some rap. And he kept saying Rico Suave. And so that was my introduction to
Oh my
how some
God.
how
So
some young
unsettling.
man, yeah, how some young man saw me really quickly. And I think that, and I think Frida experienced a little bit of that when she came to the United States. They were
Mm.
fascinated by the way that she dressed, by the way that she looked, but in a ways that it was that was actually, she was being exoticized quite a bit. But I love how she turned that around, and she kind of took that image and made it an armor for herself. It's like, yes, like, like, you're looking at me, then I'm really gonna make you look at me, right? And
Mm.
I'm gonna like have this performative, like, I'm even gonna like make it more intense, like the way that I look and the way, and I love how she, kind of she took that to her advantage when she was in the United States. Incredibly outspoken woman,
I mean,
and
it's also just shows how brave she was too, because you mentioned she was here for like 3 years, and I remember the first 3 years I was here, I don't think I spoke too much, I was just so afraid of saying the wrong thing. So
yeah. And and I think that in our experiences, we're still, so many times we're told that we don't belong to the space that we access, that we gain, or sometimes where it's explicitly like our talent is being questioned. It's just like, oh, you're here because they needed a brown face, or
mm,
I know I felt like that through college, in my career, sometimes, like wondering if it's like I'm being asked to be here because of my talent, or because they needed Latina in the crew. And a lot of times it's hard to speak out. It's hard to be outspoken. It's hard to be like very confident sometimes in these spaces that question us. So that was something that she really inspired me. She's really inspired me to kind of hold my ground strongly throughout my career.
that's very, very important. And I would love to talk a little bit more about how you went into editing and, just like the documentary world. But let's go back a little bit. When did you move to the States? Because you mentioned in high school
Yes.
time.
So I was 14. It was 1990. Uh,
Okay.
Now I'm much older than you, so now you have to go look for that song. You'll hear it.
I'll look for
It was a
it.
really popular song back then. Yeah. We moved from Lima to Boston. And I remember it was a really cold February morning when we
Oh,
arrived in Boston. And that night they had a big snowstorm. And it was really beautiful. I mean, I was not prepared. Like, I didn't have the right shoes or jacket for the snow. But I remember that night so clearly because ¿cómo se dice las copas de nieve,
snowflakes?
the snowflakes that you can really see the design, like
Yeah,
they were so big, so I could really see them. So I just spent like, I think, an hour outside just looking at the snowflake, like falling on my body.
that's so
It's
wholesome.
yeah. I barely spoke English, just the basic, like, my name is Carla. So it was an experience. And we ended up in a neighborhood that had international students and actually a lot of Russian immigrants and more Asian immigrants, but not that many Latinos. So that was an interesting experience as well.
I moved here when I was 12, so kind of like similar-ish ages, but I think high school it's definitely a tough time to move here.
I
How
know. I moved right before all the quinceañeras in Peru.
uh,
I'm missing all the great party.
how is that like being a Latina where there, because I know in some Latino households there's like a big like you can't be a musician, you can't be like an actor, like basically don't go into the entertainment world because you will be broke kind of
Yeah.
stigma. Like did you face any of that, or were your parents more like, do as your heart desires?
I was lucky and also hard work through high school. But my sister, I have an older sister that is only a year and a half older than me. So she, in a way, like, opened up the path for us to like look into colleges. I owe her a lot because I was just kind of following what she learned, right? But we both went to really great liberal arts schools. And my parents they were always very supportive. They were always very supportive of just us in general. I think partly because math was something that I excel on, and also because I felt so uncomfortable with English at the beginning. I gravitated towards like, doing all the really hard math classes. So I was doing math for a long time in college as well. And then I
Okay.
was taking some studio art classes and some Latin American literature classes. So I got into film pretty late,
Oh,
after
wow.
a
That's
few years.
interesting.
Yeah, after a couple of years of working in advertising, which I really was not for me. And my parents were always really supportive, especially because I decided to get into film through education. Education was always like, a point of access for me. I knew it well. So I decided to go to film school, and I went to film school. Stanford has a documentary film graduate program, which is it's like very small, only 8 people. And
Wow, that is very small.
it's very 16 total. It's like 8 each year, and there's like 2 years of school. Anyways, it helps a little bit, right? When you are getting to Stanford for your
Definitely.
graduation. At that time in Peru, and even now, there's not a huge like film community.
Hmm.
Is very different than Mexico or Chile. So my parents and even I, before I got into it, we didn't really know much about the industry. We didn't know much about what's possible to do in documentary filmmaking. So my parents just really kind of supported me, without really having knowledge of what I was getting into at all. And I think that there was a film that I edited really early on in my career that kind of like that got a lot of recognition. It was a short film called La Corona, and it was about beauty, like a beauty competition in a prison in Colombia.
Oh, okay.
That ended up on HBO. It's a short, it's like 40-minute film, but we got an Oscar nomination for that film.
Amazing.
And it was then where my parents were able to see that film and kind of see the recognition that it got, that they really understood what I was doing, what I was getting into. Always supportive. They supported me as a person, even
That's
though we
amazing.
all had
Yes.
very little knowledge of like what I was trying to do. Until I started applying to film schools, I didn't know what were the possibilities of making a sustainable living in documentary filmmaking.
That's so interesting. I'm just drawing so many similarities to you, and it makes me wonder. Like, I wonder if immigrants, and not in general, I hate to generalize. Sometimes we gravitate towards math in school because it's like English is so daunting, especially when you're just first learning it. And math is almost like a universal language. Like
Yeah.
a number is a number in English or in Spanish. I used to be in the STEM world, and I love the STEM world, but I now gravitate towards like photography and video and kind of getting into that realm. So it's so cool to hear, you started somewhere else and then you did film, which is so inspiring, honestly. It really is never too late to
Thank
do
you.
that.
And one thing that, I think for a lot of us in our experience is that we're paving the way. Like it's like a new thing that we're doing for our families and our communities. I come from like really educated families in Peru. Like my grandfather was a elementary school principal in Peru for a public school. Both my parents went to college. My dad got a master's. My mom got her master's when she was in her 60s. But,
Wow.
my sister and I weren't doing something new by, applying to college.
Hmm.
But with film, with the art, I was doing something that my family was not familiar with. So, and for a lot of immigrants, obviously sometimes we gravitate towards some security, right? Something
Yes.
like a career that we know will help us.
Financial stability.
Financial stability, because if we enter other options, it's the unknown. We're like stepping into the unknown, and we're like creating a new path for both our communities and our families. So it is in the film industry, there is so much about also kind of like your personal connections.
So much. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask you, like, how have you been able to like progress so well in your career? From this side, it looks like, you had a very good career in film, and obviously you must be talented, but besides that, like, how would you say you've been able to succeed in this field?
I think that it's a combination of like really concentrating and learning my craft well. Like I think that it is once you get like once you have a little window to jump into like a space where you have an opportunity, right? It's about proving that that your talents really belong there. You would say that that's also a burden that, people of color have more than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like I kind of like really took advantage of the opportunity that being bilingual afforded me. Being bilingual was a way to get into some places, because the films that are in Spanish, like they needed an assistant editor, they needed some translations to be done. But then once you get that opportunity, then you like do the like as much as you can with it. That's when that you've really learned how to do storytelling, that you're really curious about it. That's where it really kind of pays off. Because a lot of people, it's really interesting. Like lately, I've been discussing this with a colleague. Like we're hearing a lot of people like trying to learn how to do the networking, how to get that opportunity. But we're not hearing young people talk about like, tell me about story. Like, I want to learn more about story. What can I do to like really focus on my craft? Really like, become more skilled at like understanding how to create a narrative arc that is strong, right? And when I think about, especially about the lack of access and equity for people of color, I have to think about, both access and excellence coming hand in hand, support opportunities for access, but also support talent and artists in terms of like, how do their talents excel, right? How do we support that as well? How do they, opportunities for them to really learn and master their craft.
You bring up a great point, and it definitely isn't about just having the Latina editor in their team. It's about having the excellent individual that happens to be Latina. So yeah. I'm with you on that 100%. I wanted to ask you if you could also share with us a little bit about Peru and like the culture over there, and what has it been like to represent your country in a way in the work that you do or in the communities that you are, because I could imagine that there aren't a lot of like Peruvians or Peruvian Americans in the film industry here.
I've been thinking about this because I do have a desire for our work with Frida to be recognized, in any way, like from reactions from audiences to, any kind of recognition that the film can attain. For me, it's really about the recognition of our talent as a team. Our creative team is all Latinx or Mexican crews.
Amazing.
In our creative crew, we have two wonderful, gringo collaborators that I love to death. But then the rest of the crew is Latino, is Latinx. So there's a lot of pride there. Like I want Mexico to feel proud of the way that we've told a Mexican story. I want Mexico to feel proud of the Mexican talent that have worked on the film. Like our composer is Mexican. Our entire animation team is Mexican. We finished the film there with, a Mexican sound team and a Mexican like color video team. And then I also want Peru to feel really proud. I'm going to get a chance to go to Peru for the Lima Film Festival, and we're showing Frida as the opening film for that.
Oh my God, that's so exciting.
It's really exciting. And, I left Peru really young. I'm not sure if I had stayed in Peru, if I would have found my way to documentary filmmaking. Your background, the being that you become because of where you come from, and those connections, all of that is injected in the type of work that you do. I mean, I do feel that like my spirit as a person, it shows even in the rhythm of how a film moves, how I edit it. And all of it goes into your creative expression. So Peru and my family are very much in all the creative work that I do. And I want to make my puppies proud.
How difficult or how is your experience moving here and like assimilating, getting used to this new culture? How is that journey for you?
It's a beautiful and also sometimes difficult journey. I really find so much beauty in kind of the new communities that we're creating and the new people that we're creating. I mean, I see my kids, they have a very different identity than I do as an immigrant. I also came here very young. I love that. You know, some of the biggest artists doing Latino music, they're like first, second generation Latinos that are like playing the music of their parents. And how beautiful is that? Like, how are we changing our cultural expression because of our immigrant or our first generation identities? And I love, like, for example, how my kids are forming their identities and they're expressing themselves. And it's very different from my own. Particularly for me, feels a little bit of a challenge is that, like, I feel like sometimes I don't have a sense of home because I grew up in Peru, but I left so young that I don't feel like that's home anymore. But I also don't feel like I have a home in the United States.
I completely relate to that.
So people, I think that like people carry that sense of home for me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so it's like you find that way, but it's also really interesting. Like in Peru, I am very much like a white, middle class Peruvian. Like my identity in Peru shifts really quickly because of the power dynamics of what a person like me carries when they're in Peru, right?
And even like the socioeconomic status, I mean, at least
Very
that happens
much.
to me in Colombia. It's like,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's like I can afford all these things that in my regular life here, I can only, dream of sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and people treat you in very different ways, I mean, I'm called like señorita and señora all the time. Yeah, by people that are older than me. It's really interesting to see how that shift happens as soon as I step down from the plane. And then here, from my early years as an immigrant, I was very much defined as the other, like the stranger. When I was going through college and throughout decades, the whole idea of affirmative action was very much challenging articles. And I'm sure that all of us have heard all the time, it's just like, oh, well, you're here because of affirmative action. And how lucky are you that you're Latina so you can get access to like a difficult school, which is implicitly saying, you're not as talented as we are.
You don't deserve it.
You
Yeah.
don't deserve to be here. There is that. And then having a heavy accent here, there is that very different kind of like imposed identity that I've experienced a lot of times in the United States. It's like a very kind of weird dichotomy to be jumping back and forth.
Yeah, it's almost like parallel universes, but
Very
like in the same timeline.
Yeah.
Do you think you enjoy less documentaries just because like you yourself make documentaries, so you're like, you know what a good one looks like? You know what I mean? Like your standards are probably like higher when you watch them.
I don't think so. I'm a very emotional viewer of films, both in fiction and documentaries. I really love watching documentaries.
Me too.
I think that as soon as I connect with something, I kind of let go, and then I don't question, like I don't try to think about how things were done, like try to figure out like the thinking behind. I just go with it. When I cannot connect, then I cannot help myself but to see how they were trying to work things out and how they didn't quite work.
Yeah.
But as soon as I connect, I just really I'm able to really let go. I mean, that's why I love film so much, because it has such a power to take me on a journey, someplace so different, to push me in a way. Again, take me on a journey that will kind of like open up my view on things or challenge me. And that journey is just really beautiful. And so I'm like ready to jump in a journey. So yeah, as if I connect with something, I just really let go. It has to be done well. That has to be done with good storytelling, because
Yes.
You really need to like be able to touch somebody's heart or like really open up their minds, even if I mean, I don't believe in like people are perfect heroes in films. Those films to me are a little boring and not very realistic. The same thing with Frida. I wanted her not to stay as a symbol. I wanted her to be a human with all the complexities and difficulties and fragility that a human carries. And that was, another one of our intentions. It's like you can find inspiration in this woman, but look at her as a woman and not
Mm.
as, this kind of like sexy, iconic image that now we have of her.
You're spot on about that because like we as humans we're so flawed, like and we're so
Yeah.
complex. And what you mentioned that like about Frida, like I remember the thing that stuck with me the most was like that relationship with Diego, that it was just like, you would take these two incredibly talented people, incredibly passionate about their craft, and also at the same time, they connected so much about that, but at the same time you have over here like all the infidelity and just like lack of commitment like on certain ways, and it was just like it was so confusing, to watch it, but it was also so fascinating. It was like, wow, like so much passion and so much disconnection. I don't know, it was just, yeah, just fascinating.
Yeah, and we're complicated. I mean, one of the things that I've really learned throughout the years as I'm getting, I'm becoming an older woman is really, having a lot of empathy, and we're so complex, and not, not being judgmental. I think like human relationships are so complicated. They can be beautiful in their complications. I remember
Mm.
one of the most wonderful screenings of the film we had was in San Diego, and it was like mostly Latina women. Our Q&A was bilingual. It was amazing. And then it turned into, I feel like a group therapy for, for all the women that were there. But one of the things that I've heard from one of the people that were there, she said, when I learned that Frida Kahlo remarried Diego before watching your film, I was so disappointed at her,
Mm.
because I was so inspired by her power and her outspokenness, and the fact that she went back to a man that, had betrayed her, blah, 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 blah. But then she said, but when I watched your film, I understood. Like, I understood, like, that's just the love that she felt for him. That was the complicated love that she had. And I understood that, like, the power of, her as a woman was just the way she loved, even if it was hurtful, even if it was, difficult sometimes, even if it was really amazing sometimes. And yeah, I mean, as I grow older, it's like looking at relationships with not judgment is something that, that is really important, um, for me. And that's something that I've also learned through, working on this film.
That's honestly, that's beautiful. And I thank you for saying that. If you could leave our audience with a piece of advice in regards of like navigating this line of work, if people are interested to get into it, besides networking, what can they start doing?
I went into it through education, and that's one way of doing it, but it's not the only way of doing it. I know a lot of amazing collaborators that I worked with before, or people that I know that are amazing that learn by just getting work in production, or, or like they just started doing it and got also. So I would say find mentors. That's really important. Please focus on your craft, not only on like how you can get the job, but once you're there, that you can really show what your talents are. So learn how to tell a story really well, and that's, you do that by like finding mentors. You also do that by watching a lot of films. Like, I watch a lot of documentaries. I study some documentaries when, they really like touch me a lot. When I'm making films, I'm watching a lot of documentaries for inspiration. So,
Mm.
so please, yeah, like, find ways to really learn how other people do it, so that you can also learn your craft and how to do storytelling well, because there's not that many amazing storytellers out there. So, become one. Yeah, and then find your people, find your support system, find your people, because also they're going to give you the jobs in the future. But find that community.
Carla, thank you so much for taking the time. I am just so over the moon that we had this conversation. It's so cool to get to talk to you, and I actually listened to what you had to say about the film before watching it, and I think
Oh,
that really transformed the way I looked at it because I was kind of almost looking at it through your eyes, or through
oh,
your perspective. So I think that really put me in a different mindset, and I was like, oh, how cool would it be to watch every movie through the lens of the director. So
that is, and that's a good way to actually learn about storytelling. So, yeah. So for
wonderful.
those young emerging filmmakers, yeah, listen to how the directors think or the editors think.
Thank you for tuning in today. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube at doce.podcast. That's DOCE.podcast. Leave us a review on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This was Doce, the podcast for immigrants by immigrants.